It's 420 somewhere, and right now that somewhere is right here on the Cannabist Show. So hello and welcome. I'm producer Vince, and over here is your host, Ricardo Baca.
Hey, thanks, Vince. And thanks to everyone listening to the podcast and watching the show today. Here at the Cannabist Show, we talk about all things marijuana. You know, we talk about the serious stuff happening in state houses and legislatures across the country, and we also talk about some of the silly stuff that regularly happens all over the weed space.
And that silly stuff, Ricardo, there's more than plenty to go around.
Oh man, it's true, it's true. So the marijuana beat really runs the gamut, and both of our guests today will be able to, they'll be able to speak to that. But before we introduce our first guest, Vince, how you been?
You know, it's another day in paradise, another week in paradise here in Colorado. I mean, other than the 100,000 degree thing that's happening lately, it's been pretty damn good. How about you, dude?
Oh man, dude, in a 110-year-old house without central air conditioning, as much as I love my house, it is torturous, but it's been fantastic. Life is good. Colorado's beautiful. It just feels like we're falling into a kind of normal space with all this marijuana space, you know, awesome. Marijuana stuff. So, hey, I think it's time, Vince, to drop into the week in weed.
The week in, I always feel like we need like do-do-do-do-do music for it.
I know. Well, you can make that happen. You're the producer,
okay.
So can you make that music happen for next week's show?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Week in weed.
So this week in weed, Vince, starts in Ohio, where Buddie, the marijuana mascot, is spreading the word of issue number 3.
Oh, Buddie, here. Let me pull up a photo of Buddie. I don't know how I feel about it. What's with the blue cape?
You're not alone. You're not alone. Buddie is a giant green marijuana nug in a white superhero suit traveling the state of Ohio to promote issue number 3, which is, of course, the very controversial initiative that would legalize cannabis in Ohio.
Medicinally and recreationally, right?
Yeah, they're going for it. And I don't think that many people know what to think about a giant marijuana superhero plant.
I'm not really sure what to feel about it either. I mean, I like big superhero guys as much as the next person at Disney World, where, you know, children get to play with them, but to promote an adult issue, I don't really see the connection here. It kind of brings up what? Old Camel Joe Camel?
I know, yeah.
Right?
That, or he kind of reminds me of Buzz Lightyear. Is that the Tim Allen character from the Toy Story? He kind of has that futuristic white spacesuitness about him. It's questionable either way. A lot of people are kind of tipping their heads and raising their eyebrows and wondering what's going on in Ohio exactly. But, Vince, in other marijuana news, there's a social network that caters to the marijuana crowd, and it's hoping that its stock will soon be listed on the Nasdaq exchange, and that's a pretty big deal for a weed company.
And you're talking about MassRoots. I love MassRoots. I'm always on MassRoots. Other than Instagram, I'm opening it, and we've had those guys on this show before.
Yeah, exactly. That's the social media company, MassRoots. CEO Isaac Dietrich has visited the couch before, and now he's filing an application to have MassRoots shares listed on the Nasdaq capital market.
Now, whenever I'm on MassRoots, it feels like Instagram hits Twitter, hits Facebook with a little bit of weed wrapped in, and it's a place where you can find a smoking buddy, look up a pot shop, or even post your favorite clip from the Cannabist Show, which I do every week. But why would they want to uplist their stock like this?
You know, from what I understand, it's primarily a money thing. They told my colleague Alicia Wallace that the move would enable the company to, quote, attract a broader range of institutional investors and increase share liquidity, whatever that means. But they also said it would help shift the paradigm around investing in the regulated marijuana market.
All right, I guess that makes sense. And now that MassRoots has more than 500,000 users, it'll be interesting to see if its Nasdaq application is accepted.
You know, I agree. And our first guest this week, I might have to ask him about that. He is a new acquaintance of mine, and he's also the co-founder of a marketing agency, Blank Space Media. He recently moved here to Denver from New York City, and he's one of the biggest Fish fans I've ever met, which is saying something. It's my pleasure to welcome Zac Cohen to the Cannabist Show. How's it going, Zach?
Thanks, Ricardo. How are you?
Good running
Thanks
into
for
you
having
this weekend.
Yeah, it was a good party on Sunday.
Yeah, did you have fun at Sam and Jake's?
Yeah, they're fantastic. Good couple.
Dude, I'm psyched to talk normalization with you because you and I were just talking a couple days ago at a barbecue, and you run an advertising agency, a branding company with a bunch of weed clients. So let's hear it. What kinds of conversations are you having in your office about reaching out to the various modern cannabis consumers?
I think, thanks for having me. The conversation that dominates our internal chatter, as well as the conversations we have with our clients, is how to articulate the cultures of our clients to their audiences. And more specifically, it's about bringing, how are we bringing in new customers and new consumers into the space without alienating the existing customer base. This is what we focus on. We want to push the conversation forward. We want to introduce new language, new cultural mores, and we want to strip down the taboos that exist around cannabis. So that's where most of our energy goes to, is basically broadening the reach of cannabis.
And you mentioned something interesting, and we've certainly written and talked quite a bit about that in the past. Some high-profile instances of people in your exact business, trying to run a marijuana advertising company, branding company, and stepping on the people who came before, intentionally, unintentionally. So how do you do that? How do you put out the word without alienating this core base of users who have been there since 60s, 70s, 80s?
Delicately. That's the challenge, and that's actually one of the reasons why I came to Colorado. I saw this industry burgeoning, and for me and the people I work with, as well as our clients, but internally as well, we're fascinated by the idea of taking a new industry with no accepted traditions or legacies around marketing and branding, and realizing that as legalization spreads and as decriminalization spreads, more and more Americans are going to come into contact with cannabis. And we wanted that contact to be a positive experience. We wanted it to be something that people could be proud of, to understand the holistic and health benefits of cannabis, as well as quite clearly the recreational and fun aspects of getting high. It really runs the gamut from health, wealth, well-being. There's also obviously an economic opportunity. We also are motivated by the social justice component, the opportunity to be a part of the movement that is ending the drug war, something that's really powerful. We're a values-driven agency, and that's something that we just had to get involved in.
It's fascinating. If you can, give me a concrete example. Here you are working with this base of clients in Colorado and elsewhere, and how are you doing that? How are you paying the right attention and reaching out to these new consumers without ticking off or neglecting, the old school, the old guard?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can give you an example from one of our clients up in Boulder, headquarters cannabis company. They're a boutique cultivator, retailer, 2 locations, and they're a bit upmarket. It's Boulder. They're very much of Boulder. Ashley Reingold, who runs the company, lives up there with her 3 children, and we recently put an ad in a yoga magazine, a new yoga magazine that's new to Colorado. And it was the first cannabis ad to be featured in this yoga magazine. Sure. And that very easily, it's a very beautiful ad. It says, "Yes, Your Highness," and it's got a image of a woman doing basically, I think, wheel pose or something, maybe a flying crane, I don't know. Although I am a yoga, I should know it. And it's a sort of a very positive message that you wouldn't expect to see with cannabis. There's not bud everywhere. There's not, THC levels and, these are our best concentrates. And there's nothing wrong with most of the advertising that's going on. It just seems to be speaking to itself. The community and the business is speaking to other people in the space. Whereas by approaching cannabis and yoga, we're actually extending that into a few demographics that we're interested in. One is females, who control a lot of the household spending in America. Sure. And we think that's a big opportunity. And
also traditionally a group that people have this somehow very false view that doesn't ingest cannabis, that doesn't consume marijuana, but of course they do.
If you walk into any of the dispensaries in Denver or throughout Colorado, you're going to see a lot of women working in those stores. Sure. And it's not just on the bud tender side. You'll see a lot of managers, a lot of retail experts, And certainly on the management side, I've had the pleasure of working with a number of great female-led organizations, including Headquarters, Canyon Cultivation. Morgan Iverson's a visionary in the same way in the edible space. And obviously Jane West and Olivia and Jennifer from Canna Brands. There's any number of women. So I think it's important that we're approaching that community and really understanding you belong here. So yeah.
It's interesting. You mentioned your client Headquarters. We were talking about them on the show a couple weeks ago with the upcoming dinner.
Oh, that's right.
And I believe I'm going to the dinner.
I hope so. Yeah.
So this
I'm
is
gonna have to drag you there if you don't want to.
This is the top chef. He's the champion who lives in Boulder, right? And
yeah,
he's going to cook a fancy 4-course meal for us.
This speaks to your point as well. Headquarters is hosting a farm dinner. It's an exclusive event held on a farmette, or the farmette that they call them, in Boulder, actually in Longmont. And Josiah Rosenberg, who's has a restaurant and catering company in Boulder called Black Belly, one of the finest chefs in the country. He was very early on a Top Chef winner and has since made Boulder his home and has access to, I think, 3 farms. So everything he cooks is obviously it's taking the local farm to table, sustainable, artisanal food movement, which obviously belongs in Boulder.
It does.
As I saw it come to life in Brooklyn over the last 10 years or 15 years. And really, actually, there's a lot of similarities between the sort of local foods and artisanal food movement and cannabis, sort of a grassroots, bottom-up movement, very people-powered. It starts at farmers markets, and then it sort of, now you see those products in Whole Foods, and you can go across the country, and there's imitators. So, but yeah, I mean, with the farm dinner that we're hosting, for us, that's another audience that we want to reach is foodies. People who really love to eat, people who will make reservations weeks out ahead of time when they travel. They're looking for the best restaurants in a certain city or town, and where food has become a destination. And we wanted to basically show the foodie community in Boulder, which is a very loyal and very active community, that cannabis, wine, food, drink, cocktails are it's part of the same conversation.
Sure.
Certainly, yeah. So.
And we were talking about it when we were talking about it. I think one of the things that kind of clicked with me was transportation provided. It's like, here, come, enjoy paired cocktails and paired strains, and let us give you a ride back to your neighborhood, back to your hometown at least.
Every single client in the space and every single business has a responsibility as much as possible to educate, and of course for things like driving and under the influence. So this was another opportunity for us to just say, hey, you guys don't have to work tonight. We're in charge, and just get yourself to the shuttle, and you're going to get home safe, and you can imbibe as much or as little as you want. And we hope people come and enjoy. I think the food's going to be delicious as long as the weather holds up, which I think it will.
Nice. Well, you mentioned something earlier that's important. This whole idea of enjoying marijuana recreationally, because much has been necessarily made of the medical movement. But something that isn't talked about a lot is the people who aren't ingesting weed to get obliterated and wasted. The people who are just coming home from a long day and using it like they would a beer, or maybe just finding an alternative to something that they used to recreate with. And I'm just curious, you're new to Colorado, but you're heavily involved in this space. Is this something that you've witnessed here? And also, is it something that you've seen kind of increase with popularity in your time here?
I think I've definitely seen in the past year the cultural taboos starting to kind of come down. Those walls are coming down. I think it's clear now that legalization in Colorado has succeeded, at least thus far. We're coming up on 2 years, and the horror stories and the end of world scenarios that were promised by various people have not come to pass. And in fact, most of the state seems to be just kind of getting along with it and coming to terms with it and actually advancing it. In fact, I think today there was a movement in Boulder. The Daily Camera in Boulder published an op-ed, or it may have been a piece by a writer, I wasn't sure, basically asking Boulder County, which notoriously has pretty strict and out-of-date regulations, to just sort of catch up with the rest of the state.
Right.
Like, we're losing business, we're losing, and then I've seen that firsthand because of our clients in the space in Boulder. They can't do certain things like discounts and promotions, and there's just a lot of red tape. So I think that only happens when there is success, when there isn't, giant numbers of DUIs, when there aren't, obviously deaths or any increase in crime, which there, as far as I know, hasn't really been a noticeable uptick. On a personal level, I think it's interesting when people come into into the recreational market, they sort of go all out. My first few months in town, it was, total kid in a candy store. I was buying from 4 dispensaries a week, and I was, it's market research, and I was trying to deduct it, trying to get my partners to let me deduct my weed purchases. I don't know, we'll see where that ends up. But I think after a while, it sort of calms down, and people just sort of find their rhythm with it. And whether they're buying weekly or once a month, they find the dispensaries they like, they find the bud tenders they like, they find the areas of town where they like to shop. They figure out flower, concentrate, edibles, topicals, tinctures, and they sort of, like with alcohol, I mean, everyone starts, not everyone, but a lot of people start alcohol binge drinking or drinking beers in high school. You get to college and you're doing keg parties. You can't keep that up through your 20s and 30s. You'd kill yourself.
I know a few people who have amazingly, and props to them. And
yeah, more power to them. But after a while, you realize, hey, I really like a dry gin martini, and I like 2 of them, and that's it. And that's what I like in the evenings or on the weekends. So I think there is this sort of normalization, this sort of people find their balance. I've certainly heard innumerable stories about people who used to drink more or used to rely more on pharmaceuticals, things like Xanax or Ativan or other sort of calming medications, and they're like, I'd rather have something that's a plant, and I'd rather have something that is, certainly as you get older, you can't have 4 or 5 drinks, cocktails in a night. You're going to feel it the next day, but you can definitely smoke a half a joint or take a couple of dabs off a vape pen and feel fine the next morning, get the same or similar effects, or frankly even better effects.
It's this whole job for me, this immersion into a world that I was largely unfamiliar with before getting this assignment has been endlessly fascinating, and I did realize that after going through all of 2014, which was just mayhem at this newspaper, at the site, the Cannabist, and then kind of looking up and it's the end of the year and just realizing how much less money I spent in 2014 on alcohol versus the previous year. It's uncanny, and it will definitely be in a story or a book in the near future, but it really is.
Purely on an economic level, it's a sort of a stunning story. I mean, the alcohol industry is, I think, something like $200 billion a year.
Sure.
And not only that, if you attach the productivity loss to the national economy as a whole because of alcohol, because of deaths, because of drunk driving, because of accidents, because of everything else, alcoholism. So yeah, I mean, I certainly hope that people drink less and smoke more. I'm an advocate. I mean, I pull no punches about that. We need to drink less as a society.
Zach, super fun to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk some more here in a few minutes too. Now, before we introduce our next guest, I am going to throw to the esteemed Professor Pat for this week's entry in the new Cannabist lexicon.
Dab. The act of dabbing concentrates onto a hot surface, producing a vapor. Can also be used as a noun, meaning small amount of concentrate, a dab's worth. I just took my first dab. Whoa.
So good. Thank you, Professor Pat. Now, our next guest is a regular contributor to the site, and he's also author of the new book, Carnality, Dancing on Red Lake. Let's bring out Josiah Hesse to the couch. How's it going, Josiah?
Hey, good to see you.
You too, man. This is your first time on the show.
It is. It's very exciting. I like your set. It's
Thanks.
very getting dug with high.
Is it? Yeah. He has some like space stuff going on in the background.
Yeah.
We're not in
right?
a space, man. It's a little past that.
He is definitely in deep space. Doug Benson, we love him here at the show. Josiah, first things first. Last week's story, man. It was one of the most popular things on the site of the week, and it's one of my favorite things you've ever written that I've read. So basically, you got to hang and spend the day with the guy who was the inspiration for the dude and the Coen brothers' Big Lebowski, right?
Yeah. There's this guy, Jeff Dowd. He's an old friend of the Coen brothers. He is known as like a producer in California and worked on movies like Fern Gully.
Yeah,
and
he did like marketing, right?
Yeah. Marketing. He was a co-producer of Fern Gully.
Oh, wow.
He also worked on like Desperately Seeking Susan, a bunch of
course.
movies. But he met the Coen
Fern
brothers.
Gully, Desperately
Blood
Seeking
Simple.
Susan.
Basic instinct.
Their first movie, Blood Simple, was where he first worked with them, and this was in the early '80s. And by the time they came up with the idea of Lebowski, they described it as they wanted to take their friend, who was just a kind of perpetually confused pothead and put him into like a Raymond Chandler Big Sleep kind of detective noir story. And they said like it's the person who's least equipped to deal with that would make for a really funny scenario. And so that's become his big claim to fame. And there's conventions. He was doing public appearances in town when I met him. And we went up to the Odell Brewery. And I don't know, the guy was kind of a nightmare.
It sounded tough, like difficult to get stuff out of him. It's a quotable quote even.
Well, plenty was tumbling out of him. It just didn't make a lick of sense. He's just kind of like an old fried hippie. You know, I might piss some people off saying that, but like, I don't know what people really get out of meeting him. I mean, but that you could expand that question into all kinds of realms, like meeting your heroes, the public appearances. People pay more money to be a VIP at a show for the meet and greet. And it's like, what are you really wanting to get out of that exchange? What are you expecting the person to be? And this isn't even like a person like if I was going to meet Morrissey, like that, I'd at least have a comprehensive idea of who Morrissey is. Like this is someone who's, you know, the basis of a character. And there's a lot of the dude in him. You see it in the body language. But he's just kind of goes off on conspiracy theories and rants and mumbles a lot. And
it sounds like meeting Larry David without meeting Larry David, you know, without Larry David being this amazing, eloquent, hilarious human being.
Yeah.
Instead, he's kind of a disaster.
Yeah. But at least Larry David, you get the idea that he's a functioning human being. I mean, I think this is all the dude really does is just kind of, well, that's not fair. He is active in things, and you know, maybe I don't know enough about him to say that's all he does, but you get the impression like that he's not capable of a whole lot because he's just, I don't know. I probably shouldn't just rag on him the whole time, but after spending like 6 hours with him in a car, like when we were at the brewery, I was hiding from him. Like I would just like find myself hiding in corners because he's that kind of guy that's going to latch onto you and just like pump words into your face, and you're not going to understand any of it.
And you knew you had a car ride home with him too.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it was a great piece. Everybody who's listening and watching, I highly recommend you check it out, thecannabist.co. Josiah, you've written a bunch of stuff for us, but I know something that you've been interested in writing more and more about is, you know, marijuana inside the context of working out, inside the context of exercise. So is this something that you yourself have experimented with? And if so, what do you get from, you know, from getting high before a workout?
Well, it's interesting. Like you were saying, a lot of people take marijuana like they would alcohol to relax after work and to kind of unwind. And it's never really been that experience for me. I've been smoking cannabis since I was about 18, 19. I'm 33 now.
Sure.
And it's always been kind of an uplifting, energizing, you know, inspiring kind of thing. It doesn't necessarily mean you're the highest functioning, or at least for me, in certain like really complicated situations, but it really gets me motivated. And I've been working out for like 4 or 5 years now. I was never really athletic as a teenager, but I kind of figured out it's another drug that gets you high if you do it right. And adding THC to the mix, it's like candy flipping or something, you know, the ecstasy and acid thing. And it's not just any cannabis though. Like I don't like smoking it beforehand. It's almost strictly edibles. And I've only found a certain number of edible companies and products that work for me. My favorite is the Growing Kitchen Zoom Balls. There's a plug for you guys. Chiba Chews are okay. Sweet Mary Jane's key lime kickers are good. But even
the key lime kickers are nice.
Yeah, they taste really
Smooth.
good. But the problem with those with cannabis is, and what makes the Growing Kitchen so great, is you don't want like a sugary, you know, chocolatey, fatty kind of edible right before you go on a long run. It's just going to wear you down. You want something that's got, you know, nuts and honey and, you know, whole grains and like good stuff in it, because that'll also give you an energy boost.
Sure.
But I found out recently that it only works, or at least for me, in a certain context. Like I love long distance running and I love, you know, lifting weights and working out at home, but that's all alone, kind of doing my own thing. Or running, you're not really thinking that much, you're just kind of going. I recently tried it playing soccer, And
Team sports.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. And I never played sports as a kid. And I had never played soccer before. I'd like kicked a soccer ball around, or whatever, but like I just did not know what I was doing. And I was playing with a whole team of really experienced soccer players, and I was just lost. And I think everyone was getting pissed at me because I was like messing up the game, just forgetting which way to kick the ball. At one point I was the goalie, and then I had this moment where I'm standing 10 yards away from the goal, like to the right. I'm not even guarding the goal right now. So it's great if you're like doing a long distance run. It'll increase your pain threshold. It'll motivate you to, because a lot of like long distance running is psychological. You're kind of like in battle with your own exhaustion.
Sure.
And deciding whether or not you want to stop or keep going. And for that, it'll like really propel you. But if it's something that's a novelty that you've never done before, like soccer or something like soccer, it's almost like chess. You have to do all this like complicated, stuff.
Oh yeah, you're calculating angles inside your head real time.
Yeah, in like a flash of a second. And if I'd been playing soccer for like a year or something and had some of it down, I'm sure I could take some cannabis and I'd be okay. Because it'd be more of an implicit memory thing. But if you're going to do something for the first time, don't eat a bunch of edibles beforehand. I'm not sure that needed to be said.
A recovery.
Yeah.
I use it as a recovery tool. Like I have a CBD oil that I will dab after an 8-9 mile run, and my inflammation in my knees or hamstrings is much easier. I also eat edibles before long runs too.
Yeah, and I have a topical salve that I, like just last night, I put on my knees. I played soccer for the second time yesterday.
You went back.
Sober. This time I'm pretty much sober. But yeah, I put the topical salve all over my knees and my feet for the inflammation. I've heard some mixed reviews of that, scientists saying it might not actually get into far enough.
Topicals, yeah.
Yeah.
Very unproven realm, for sure.
Yeah, so maybe it is a placebo effect. I don't know.
Sometimes they're just jam-packing those with so many really wonderful botanicals that it's like, I think it would have felt really good without the weed in it, but all that arnica, it's going to do something. Josiah, I have to ask you about this.
Yeah.
Carnality. All right, so this is your debut novel, right? And I know your narrator here lives alone in an abandoned hotel on an island where he grows his own weed and is pretty much always stoned. So give us the elevator pitch. What's this book about? And also did using cannabis inform the characters here and inform the writing process?
Well, the book, that setting is where the narrator is at. He's living on an island. He's telling his story as he's living alone on this island. And yeah, he smokes a lot of cannabis. He grows it himself. And it's kind of the oasis that he always wanted. And you see as he tells his story that he's lived a very restrictive life in a religious context. The book, I often describe it as a psychological horror about evangelicals. It's about kind of the history of evangelical Christians in America, and it has a kind of Stephen King, Tom Robbins style of story. This is actually the first of a series of 6 books that I wrote, and it's a kind of a long, historical fiction bracket starting in 1967 and ending in 2008. So in the 60s stuff, there's also a lot of cannabis use.
I've heard it was popular then.
Right. It's something that is peppered throughout because it's just been a big part of my life, like I said, since I was 18 and 19.
And did that use inspire you? Did it help you keep going and focus on those long nights of writing, or did it help inform this this main character?
I find with writing, kind of like what I was saying before, on an inspiration level, it's something that's really good for coming up with ideas, working through things, jotting down a lot of notes, and maybe some of the wilder, looser scenes where you kind of improvise a lot of lines and just sort of let things carry off. Those, like cannabis, could be used in that context, or I sometimes do, but for the most part, I don't like writing like the work of writing while stoned.
Sure.
Like I say, like the ideas, definitely, and some kinds of writing. If I'm writing like letters to friends, which is my favorite type of writing, I think that's like the most pure kind of writing. A little bit of cannabis is great, or with a glass of whiskey. But no, it's just hard to. You know, like that edibles piece I did for the Cannabist. That was something that I was so insecure about for like the first half of it because there was just so little scientific data on the subject, and I was getting different information from everyone. And people are saying, no, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about, listen to me. And that guy doesn't know what he's talking about, listen to this. And it was all up in the air. And to be able to just like take in all of that information and try and put together some kind of informative, you know, truthful narrative is very difficult. So no, I couldn't smoke during that. But with something, you know, with something like this that's a lot of just kind of vivid colors and pictures, yeah, marijuana is very helpful.
Well, congratulations. It's very cool. I do want to bring Zac back into the conversation. So we're all going to have this conversation about the word stoner. Dudes, do you guys identify as stoners? And also, do you think it's a relevant word anymore? Zac, let's start with you.
I kind of have a hot and cold relationship with the term stoner. There are times when I feel the word used negatively and I sort of get defensive, and I'll sort of, oh, I'm a stoner and I do this and I do that, and here are all the things that I do, and how, you know, I kick ass, you know, that's sort of this posture. And I think there are other times when, you know, I understand the sort of pejorative of it and the value of having that. I think it's lazy. I think that it's just easy and lazy to term it like that. I mean, I know when I'm talking, I have friends of mine, I have acquaintances, colleagues, clients who are heavy users. You would never, a regular person who's never smoked weed would never ever be able to tell that person was high.
Right.
But they might smoke and consume all day, every day, and I know people have smoked every day for 20 years. And I mean, they're much more straight than I am after 2 joints. So yeah, it's sort of this hot and cold thing. I'd love to see the term go away, but it's not going to.
Well, what's fascinating about it to me is to see so many of the old guard and the new guard as well kind of accept it and embrace it and totally reinvent what it means to be a stoner.
Sure.
It meant something when we were in high school. I went to Westminster High School right outside of Denver, and I remember my friends calling a specific parking lot the stoner lot. It's where everybody went to smoke weed and smoke cigarettes and stuff. But now I know friends who are like, oh, hell yeah,
I'm a stoner.
Yeah.
Right.
Josiah,
I do CrossFit. You know.
Are you a stoner, Josiah?
I don't really identify with the word stoner. I mean, to me, it has a lot. There's a lot more to it than just being a pot smoker. I think it has like a cultural context of Jeff Spicoli, the dude.
Sure.
Kind of. It's for a lot of people synonymous with lazy, confused, unambitious, and I don't know if it really it comprehensively describes pot smokers, or if like anyone who does smoke pot regularly should identify as a stoner. It's nothing that I'm like railing against.
Sure.
You know, I'm not going to be, you know, hanging out picket signs against anyone who uses the word stoner.
I will. I'm going to do that.
But I think we're in a really interesting time for cannabis culture where we are starting to have these conversations about these things. And some people go to extreme degrees about it. I've had people who won't talk to me for an interview for a story because I use the word marijuana. And they, you know, trace it back to its roots, which is fair enough. It is a racist word, or was at one time.
Sure.
I don't know if it really carries that implication today, but that's a conversation you can have.
Always.
Some people only want to use the word cannabis. But as we were saying earlier, as a marijuana journalist, you need synonyms for that word, and you don't want to just keep piling on the same word over and over again. So yeah, it's really, it's not a word that I use though. I would never be ashamed to say that I smoke pot or cannabis or whatever.
Yeah.
Weed is something that I've kind of, I don't use that word a whole lot.
Okay.
I don't like get pissed off at anyone for using it, but it's nothing that I like volunteer. It's like the last word on those lists of synonyms for marijuana that I would use.
Sure. Would you use dank before weed?
No, because not all weed is dank.
Yeah, it's an adverb, right?
True. Not all weed is
Tea.
fire.
I'm a jazz cat, so I just say tea.
Right.
Kerouac, man.
I used to say grass, like when I first moved to Denver and like was trying, and I didn't know anyone, and I was trying to find it. I go to places like Bar and go up to strangers and be like, hey man, you know where I could find some grass? And probably just everyone thought that I was a narc that was like trying to like blend in with the. I was like fresh off the farm from Iowa, so like I was just.
And you're in a Denver dive bar, like
Yeah.
6 blocks away from where Neil Cassidy grew up.
Right.
So, hey, you know
Hey,
where any
cats.
grass is,
Grass,
guys?
dude.
Got some score on the grass.
What about this? Pothead or stoner? Which is worse?
I
Zach.
think stoner is worse. At least to me, pothead at least has a secondary connotation of being a head and coming from a bit of a more of like a hippie countercultural, convention. I think a head that's a good thing, a hippie, a head.
Sure.
Stoner, I just think it's got that. It's just lazy. Yeah, it's just got this negative connotation.
Josiah?
I think they're both, pretty negative.
Equally bad.
I wouldn't identify as a pothead either, because when you put it in that context, it's something different than I would have thought it, because I would have thought it was like alcoholic, where you've succumbed to the addiction of marijuana, like pothead.
That's a good point.
Like I can't survive without it, and maybe that's just me, and words are fluid that way. They change from culture to culture.
That's part of, I think, what's going on and what's so interesting, I think, about Colorado and Denver is we get to have these sort of conversations and experiments where, words like pothead and stoner that do have, they get unpacked. They're loaded already, and everyone has a certain belief of what stoner pothead is, and then you start mixing with other stoners. You're like, oh, well, what that guy calls a stoner is not what I call a stoner. And you could definitely go into different groups, different demographics across racial divides, and there would be slang, and a pothead might be a different word. And I think now that it's out in the open, we can actually start to have that cross-pollination.
Absolutely. I love conversations about language. And the coolest thing has happened inside this newsroom. In November and December of 2013, we had the head copy chief of the Denver Post with me and a couple other folks saying, what is our style on this? Because we didn't have
We need a style guide for cannabis.
And so we did go through the whole marijuana's racist history, the word marijuana's racist history, and ultimately settled that all of Colorado's law and most of Colorado's industry is written using the word marijuana, and so therefore it's like this word has graduated since the 1910s, the 20s, and so we in print we use marijuana, cannabis, and occasionally pot, especially because it's good for those short headline spots. But for the most part, that's all we use in print, and then online we take a little bit more freedom with it. So, stoner, pothead, less stringent definitions, but still, it's fun to have these conversations. And I wonder if we had this conversation 2 years from now, here in this very room, if it would be different at all. We'll have to maybe check that out. But it is time, you guys, for the pot quiz. So we're gonna jump right in. We work on a points system, very, very strict points system. If you get it wrong, Zach can steal and vice versa. So, Zach, you have the first question.
Great.
All right. What state recently hosted a highly publicized wedding that had a weed bar of 10 plus strains at the reception? It was in like every media outlet.
I think it was Washington.
No. Oh, no. Good guess, though. Good guess.
I saw the story.
That means you for the steal, Josiah.
Yeah, I saw that story as well. Wasn't that in Colorado?
Not this one. Yeah, this was Oregon.
Oregon.
Okay.
And they made a big deal of it because, yes, you could have weed at your wedding, but you needed a specific license and it couldn't have any interplay with alcohol or something. But they had like a bud tender there, 14 strains, people going in.
And you couldn't do that here, right?
Well,
There was a story in Boulder.
I think plenty of people
about-
have done it.
What about kids? If you have like little kids running around, is that?
Well, it's the same with booze.
They're just
Okay.
stoners too, man.
Just really little ones.
Yeah, little stoners.
All right, Josiah, next question to you. A new study in the Journal of Obesity showed that marijuana users are A, generally heavier than non-marijuana users, B, generally less heavy than non-users, or C, around the same body mass index as non-users.
Oh, I didn't hear about that story, and that's I'm really curious to find out what the answer is because I don't know. I want to say it's the same, but yeah, let's go with that. Let's say it's the same.
It's the same. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that is not right. And
It's
for the
less.
steal, it is
It's
less.
B.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry.
They had a look at the body mass index of users and non-users alike, and this was just published last week in the Journal of Obesity. And sure enough, I don't know how this happened, and they did make plenty of munchies jokes about it, but yeah, marijuana users have a lower body mass index than non-users.
It's because everyone's getting high and going long distance running, right?
That is one of the things I get uptight about with the identity of a stoner. There's someone who, the Hickenlooper line of don't break out the Cheetos and goldfish
Right.
yet. That is something that I get uptight about because I really hate crappy food. And
It's just not relevant anymore. You
No.
know, and certainly it applies to a certain segment, and it applies to me on certain nights, but not on most nights. you
Yeah.
know? I'm cool with my, late night carrot sticks and a nice walk around the neighborhood with the dog. So
That's why it's so hard to get good edibles because all these companies assume that pot smokers are all, eating brownies every day and,
Right.
don't really care about healthy food.
All right, Zach, for the next question, what country banned Wikipedia, all of Wikipedia, over a single article referencing an Indian recipe for hashish?
All of Wikipedia. I think it must have been Pakistan.
That is a very good guess. That's a very wrong guess, but good guess.
Yeah.
Josiah for the steal.
What country, you said, banned the article or
It
Wikipedia?
banned all of Wikipedia. It turned Wikipedia off because of this one recipe for hashish.
China?
Also, a good guess, and I wouldn't be surprised if that were to happen in the future, but it was Russia. Yeah. Totally bizarre, man.
I was
Russia's.
hoping it was one of those stand states, those step states with like the dictators who named all the days of the week after themselves and the dogs and stuff. Yeah.
North
They have
Korea.
pretty harsh
Yeah, North
punishments
Korea,
in Russia for cannabis users.
Do they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with it. What's going on up there?
I don't know enough of the details to be able to report on it, but I remember an interview with Pussy Riot where they were talking about, the
sure.
really harsh penalties if you're caught smoking pot.
Harsh penalties for a lot of stuff coming
Yeah.
out of Russia.
Yeah.
All right, last question of the quiz. Josiah, it is your question. After the VMAs, what pop singer shared a joint with members of the press?
Miley Cyrus?
Miley Cyrus.
Finally, I got something right.
We can't get enough of Miley Cyrus
She's
on
the
this
bae.
show.
She's the bae.
She is crazy. She's
crazy.
totally out of control.
She's amazing.
And
Awesome, lover.
hilarious. Yeah, she's I was over the tongue, but then she kind of entered into this like next level of absurdism almost, and now she's
She's an epic troll. I think she's just trolling culture at this point.
Yeah, I wonder.
Yeah,
is there
I
a
think
great
she's
biography coming out in the next couple
She's
of years?
aware.
saying-
I'm pretty sure that she's conscious of how the outlandish and absurdity comes off, and she's sort of just screwing around, like it's sort of part of her shtick now, almost like in a Warholian way. I'm not calling her Andy Warhol, but like there's an element of self-awareness and that it's like she knows she's going to get the headlines. She knows she's going to, and in the meantime, she's advancing the cause of feminism and sexuality, and she's been saying she's bisexual and now she's lesbian, and so
Hashtag free the nipple.
yeah, she sort of
freed
gets
the
to like,
nipple at
hey,
the
she
VMAs
does
again.
the sort of misdirection, like does something crazy, and then on the side she inserts her activity, her action, her advocacy.
Well, like Warhol, we know a whole lot more about her than we do about the art that she makes, or at least we talk about it more.
Totally.
What was the last Miley Cyrus song we were talking about?
Wrecking Ball.
Right, at least a year old, right?
Oh, yeah.
At 2
yeah,
years?
I think it's 2 or 3 years old, and Party in the USA is still a hot jam. It's still a
It's a
great,
great
pop
hook.
song.
It's a
That's
great
right?
like 5 years old.
Oh, yeah. It's really
she does
old.
these YouTube like backyard sessions.
Yeah,
Have you seen them?
those are
They're
great.
amazing. There's
They
one
do
with
that.
Ariana Grande, and she's in a bunny costume, and Ariana's in a unicorn
Of
costume,
course, yeah.
and they're most incredible cut you'll ever hear. Like
It's the Miley Cyrus tiny desk. It's awesome.
It's basically Miley Cyrus' tiny desk in her backyard, and Joan Baez has been there. It's crazy.
You guys, this has been so fun. I want to say thanks to our guests, Zac Cohen and Josiah Hesse, and thanks to you all for watching and listening. I'm Ricardo Baca. That over there is producer Vince and Dane and Katie and Eric and the whole crew. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next week.
I be going for the jackpot with ace in my hand, I'm raw.